Welcome back to the LFC transfer room, and I am joined by the Athletic UK's Wolverhampton Wanderers correspondent, Tim Spiers. How are you, Tim? You okay?
Good, Kris. Thanks for having me on.
I do hope I pronounce your name right, mate.
You have. You've nailed it. You're one of the 30-40% that's got it right, mate. So very much appreciated.
Not a problem at all. So we're here to talk about obviously Wolves against Liverpool on the weekend. Wolves, I mean, it's an intriguing side because at the start of the season, a lot of people wrote them off, but at the moment they're sitting in a decent position in sixth. How can you sum up their season so far, mate?
It's difficult, you know. They've sort of gone under the radar, I think, nationally. Sort of crept up to sixth, with some strange performances. They started the season playing ever so well. First three games, they sort of battered Leicester, Spurs, and Man United in the first three games for long spells, but somehow managed to lose every single game 1-0. And then since then, you know, the style that Bruno Lage has tried to implement, and he's trying to make Wolves a very different team to the one that they were under Nuno, that's sort of been reined in a little bit. And he's done really well, actually, to get quite a few good results on the board. And they've sort of crept up the table pretty quietly, but pretty quickly. Beating a lot of poor teams, it's got to be said. You know, they snuck a one away at Southampton. They beat Watford. They beat a terrible Newcastle team 2-1. They beat an awful Everton team 2-1. They somehow, you know, probably the most notable result that people might have known from Wolves this season, they were 2-0 down at Villa with 10 minutes to go and won 3-2, and they were terrible that day. So without sort of setting the world alight, they've managed to pick up some really good results. And, you know, admittedly not great opposition, but as a Wolves follower of many, many years, you know, that's certainly not to be sniffed at. And now they've got a massive test the next 2 weeks. You know, they've got Liverpool, obviously, as we know. Then they've got Man City, they've got Chelsea, and they've got Man United and Arsenal and Brighton away all this month. So they've done really well to get to sixth. Bruno Lage has been saying they need points on the board before this horrendous run. And now I guess we'll see the sort of true test of where they're at in the next few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, who's been sort of the key performers for Wolves? Because there's obviously been the usual suspects since they've gone into the Premier League, but who's been really stand out for you this season?
So they've got the third best defence, which I was looking at last night. Only City and Chelsea have conceded fewer. Conversely, they've got the third worst attack, which is just bizarre because, they are playing more attacking football. People would have grown to know how sort of dour Wolves were last season under Nuno. Very boring to watch. It's ultimately what cost Nuno his job. And Bruno has come in with his more attacking style, and they are more attacking, but it's just not quite clicking yet. However, in answer to your question, it's built on this really solid defence. Max Kilman has been a revelation this season. I'm not really aware, you know, being in the sort of Wolves bubble, I'm not aware how the wider football nation is aware of Max Kilman, but my God, he is a player and a half. Tall, lanky, rangy defender, also very good on the ball, very skillful, brings it out superbly from the back. He's got great technique from his time as a former England futsal international, which is the line that gets repeated on Sky every single time that Wolves play. So he's been great. Connor Cody's been really good of late as well. And Romain Saiss, this sort of back three, they've been ever presence, all three of them. And behind them, José Sarr in goal has made a real big impact. Not in terms of shot stopping as much, although he's pretty good at that. But he's changed Wolves' style in that he's a sweeper keeper. He's produced more sweeper keeping moments, as Opta define it, in a few games than Rui Patricio did in 3 seasons. And he's been very aggressive in his box. He's helping Wolves get on the front foot instantly. And he's been a bit of a revelation, actually. So him, and then in front of them, Ruben Neves has had a bit of a rejuvenation in midfield, kind of running the show with what's more of a possession-based game that Wolves are trying to implement this season, which really suits him. You know, Wolves are very counter-attacking under Nuno, which didn't quite get the best from Neves at all. So he's been great. So they've been the standouts, really. A good spine. And then up front, they've just been very inconsistent. Jimenez, Traoré, Hwang, Podence, Trincao, dropping in here and there with bits and bobs, but it's been built on a strong defence so far.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of from a Wolves perspective, what do you look at Liverpool at in terms of the game? Is it a game of no pressure, or is there a way that the Bruno Lage's men can go and tactically outwit Liverpool at the moment?
Oh, I mean, if I knew the answer to that, then I'd be a football manager, wouldn't I? And I'd be one of the best in the world because it seems like nobody can work that out at the moment. It's gonna be a good game. I love the fact that it's a Saturday 3:00 game. From a Wolves point of view, at Molineux, it'll be a fantastic atmosphere. That's pretty rare these days for them to have a big game Saturday 3:00. There's all sorts of narratives. I mean, Diogo Jota coming back being the main one. Adama Traore is someone who's troubled Liverpool in the past. Jurgen Klopp, openly a massive admirer of his, and I don't know if anyone will have seen. I mean, judging on the choice of games, and obviously Liverpool fans wouldn't have been watching, but the choice of games on Wednesday night, if anyone sat through Wolves 0, Burnley 0, that's any kind of neutral, then I don't know what you're doing with your life, to be honest. But if anyone did see parts of that game, or at least on Match of the Day, they would have seen Traore, who came back into the team for the first time in a while, absolutely frighten the life out of Burnley, and absolutely classic Traore. He does a couple of 70-yard dashes taking on 3 or 4 players that only maybe 1, 2 or 3 players in the Premier League can actually do. He does that, and then nothing comes at the end of it. He hit the bar with one shot and misplaced a pass with the other. That was Traore all over, but he has that in his locker, and Liverpool will be very wary of that. Robertson has suffered against him in the past. So you're looking for moments of magic against this Liverpool team. They've got a decent ground in Wolves with a good defence. I'm not saying they're going to stop them from scoring 2 goals, because nobody else can do that at the moment. So you're looking for, obviously, the look's got to go their way, and they've got to have some individual brilliance. And in Traore and Jimenez and Neves behind them, they have got that in them. So with a bit of luck in the first goal, you just never know.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've seen in recent years, Wolves haven't had the greatest time against Liverpool in the Premier League, but there was times before. I remember I was actually there in the FA Cup when Wolves won away at Anfield, and then in the FA in another FA Cup tie at Molineux. Do you think the crowd at Molineux can make a big impact against this Liverpool team?
I mean, you're being very kind there, because I remember how weak both those Liverpool lineups were, to be honest. I seem to remember 16-year-old Keanu Hoover making his debut in the second FA Cup game you mentioned. Of course, now he's at Wolves, but for if Liverpool fans are interested, unlikely to play at the weekend. He hasn't really been in the team of late. They haven't got a great record against Liverpool. I think Liverpool are the only Big Six team, in inverted commas, that Wolves haven't beaten in the Premier League since they returned in 2018. But yeah, the home form's been pretty good of late. They had 1-3 on the spin before the Burnley game the other night, when they just endured a bit of a frustrating time. Beat Newcastle, Everton, and West Ham, probably the most impressive result of the season, in a row at home. And that crowd, you hear people like Conor Cody or managers or other players, Wolves players, say how important it is, but you also hear opposition players and fans and managers say just how loud the Molineux crowd is. And if they get a sniff of a sort of a magical day on Saturday, then that'll be a massive thing for Wolves, certainly.
You mentioned Diogo Jota. This is going a bit off-piste from the game, really, but you mentioned Diogo Jota earlier. What's the overall feeling from Wolves fans towards him? Because obviously he left the club for a lot of money, and he's gone on to improve, but he wasn't quite like the shining star of the Wolves team, almost.
He was. I mean, he was one of their originals in the Championship. Came in right at the start of the Nuno project, and adored really in those first 2 seasons. But in his what would have been his 3rd season in the Premier League, his form really tailed off, and it's easy to forget. But when he was sold to Liverpool, he was 4th choice forward. Wolves have played with a front 3 pretty much exclusively in the Premier League, with Jimenez in the middle. But the forwards either side, he was down to 4th choice behind Pedence, Traore, and Pedro Neto, who was just emerging at that time. And Wolves' Europa League quarter-final against Sevilla, which was Jota's last game for the club, he was 2nd sub that day. Neto came on ahead of him when Wolves desperately needed a goal to stay in the competition. So at the time, I think there was a feeling that he'd done his 3 years, he'd probably hit his ceiling at Wolves, and if Liverpool come in, sort of fair enough, really. And that was the feeling. And then the price tag dropped. I remember putting out the tweet that it was 45 million, and the replies were basically just, okay, that's fair enough. That is for a player that and that value might look like a bargain now. It probably does, but at the time, for a player Wolves had paid 13 million for 2 years earlier, had just missed a hatful of chances in the Premier League, end of the season in bad form. To get 45 million was seen as ridiculous money. So a great deal. Do you know the only sort of bitter taste from that is that the money wasn't reinvested very well. You know, Nelson Semedo and Fabio Silva came in for a combined 70 million. That's that summer with the Jota money, and you know, they haven't made the impact that you'd expect for that kind of outlay. So yeah, I wouldn't say he's necessarily sort of loved, but not certainly not hated for moving on the way that he did. I doubt he's going to get booed unless he scores again.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, just how do you see the game going on Saturday? And you know, I want to. I always ask you guys your score predictions and what you and how you think the game will go. So yeah, what do you think will happen at Molineux at 3 p.m. on Saturday?
So what's really interesting from a Wolves tactical point of view is how they approach this game. They haven't played one of the top sides since the opening weeks of the season. Like I said, when they had that run of Leicester, Spurs, Man United. Since then, it's pretty much been exclusively bottom half teams that they've played, and they've sort of reined themselves in to beat those opponents. So are they going to go for it? You know, Bruno Lage came in on a remit of playing attacking, entertaining football. Are they going to take the game to Liverpool? I'm not sure they will. With Liverpool's goal scoring record is ridiculous. You know, Wolves will try and put a dent in that with the solid defence that they've got. I can see it being a good game. I can see it being an entertaining game. If Wolves are going to get a result, they've got to score the first goal because Liverpool can just completely run away with it. And I think they'll give them a run for their money. But I don't see anyone being able to stop Liverpool in this form. If they were playing them a couple of months down the line, it might be a different story. But right now, when they hit their peak, they're probably the best team in Europe at the moment. So it'll take something amazing, something fortuitous, something special to stop that. Can Wolves do that? Judging on the last two games where they've drawn 0-0 with Norwich and Burnley, I'd be an idiot to say that they can. So I think I'll say it's probably a 2-1 Liverpool win, but Wolves will give them a good run for their money.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much to Tim for joining us. And make sure to go and check The Athletic out on all of Tim's articles covering the game on Saturday. We will see you in the next video. See you later.